Hello and welcome to another episode of the Career Revolution podcast. My name is Leaky Bucket and I'm a career strategist. And this is the place for big ideas for careers where they all start small. I'm excited to have you here. Please make sure that you're subscribing to the channel and definitely follow me on LinkedIn if you are not doing so already. Today's guest is an interesting, award-winning business development coach. He's a consultant, strategist, and mentor with a special focus on social entrepreneurship, youth and women-owned business, and personal development and business strategy. Anton Ressel is a Cape Town-based, but he works across the world globally with everything being online. He's consulted and designed and implemented a number of really exciting economic growth programs and projects for companies like Old Mutual, Transnet, the Norwegian government, Edge Growth, Fatola, the Embassy of Finland, JP Morgan, PetroSA, Sanlam, and a host of others. Anton is also somebody who's been in this space for the full breadth of his career, 20 years and counting. So not only is he a stalwart within youth development, entrepreneurship, and this kind of business strategy, helping people's businesses grow, but he's also somebody who's going to be sticking around for the next while. So without any further ado, let's welcome him into the studio. Hello, Anton, and welcome.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for that illustrious intro.
It's an absolute pleasure. Why not have an illustrious intro? I mean, that's the best thing about being invited anywhere to speak, because somebody gets to say some super cool things about you. But look, you've done some pretty super cool things in your career. I'm amazed at the breadth of stuff that you've done, and you've been around, entrepreneurship, youth development from the early days, and you're still in it. So I can't wait for you to just start off by telling us your story. What got you into this space in the first place?
It was actually purely by default. I hadn't actually determined that this was going to be my career, that I was going to be a coach and a mentor and a business strategist, working with all manner of different projects and people over the last 20 years or so. It was really purely by default. And I studied psychology at the University of Cape Town, and I graduated and wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I was pretty sure that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life listening to other people's problems and challenges as a psychologist. Ironically, I've ended up as a business coach and mentor doing exactly that, but that's another story on its own. And when I had finished my studies, I was working as a waiter at the Bay Hotel in Camps Bay. Wasn't quite sure what my next move was going to be, and my manager at the time offered me a job and said, "Do you want to become room service manager?" And I thought, well, I don't really have any other career plans at this stage. Why not? So I said, sure. And that kickstarted an 8-year journey in the hospitality space, which I think was a really fantastic foundation for what came next, in a sense that I worked in front office management, I worked in room service, I worked in food and beverage, I worked in ops. I got a full kind of 360-degree view of how that industry worked at a number of different 5-star hotels, ending up as food and beverage manager at the Cape Grace Hotel, which is one of the best hotels in the world. And that journey really gave me a very, very solid underpinning in terms of what came next, in terms of learning about the dynamics of a business, how to deal with people, how to manage a team, the numbers side of things, the sort of operational side of things. So it was a really great sort of opportunity to learn. After about 7 or 8 years, I had a bit of an aha moment when I was actually at the Cape Grace. My general manager at the time was a very successful man in the hospitality industry. He was the GM of the best hotel in the world. But I looked at him and thought, here's a chap who's in his mid-50s. He's been married and divorced 3 times because it's a very difficult industry to maintain a relationship, particularly if you're not both in it. He was stressed all the time. He was under constant pressure from shareholders. And it was like a penny drop moment. I just realized I don't want his job. And if I don't want his job, what am I doing here? Why am I in this space? Why am I on this sort of upward trajectory? My career path has almost been preordained for me. And it was just really an incredible realization that I need to make a change. And fortunately, at the time, a friend of mine, I've always played music and I played in a number of bands. And at the time, I was playing in a fairly successful band which had a manager. And the manager of the band, a chap by the name of Patrick, had a concept for a business or an online platform. And this is back in sort of the 2000s. So it's quite a while. It was early days for things like online platforms and that kind of thing. And he had a concept for something that celebrated the best in African culture, music, art, craft, and he wanted to build a whole channel around it. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he roped me in to do some copywriting. I do copywriting as well, and I wrote some copy for the website, and I wrote a proposal, and we managed to get a bit of startup capital from his parents, but not for free. It was money that needed to be repaid.
Alone?
Yes. And we started a business called Streetwires. And I left the comfort and security of my hospitality job with a decent salary and, things like medical aid, et cetera, to go into a startup with no clue what we were doing. Working from my friend's house, mother's house, actually, and trying to build something new and interesting from the ground up. And fortunately, I'd had that experience in the hotel business around systems and processes and, building teams and managing people and that kind of stuff. So I brought a bit of that into the mix. But this was a very different animal, and we ended up building a manufacturing business called Streetwires that grew rapidly. We ended up with 120 staff exporting to 23 countries.
Wow.
And making and selling African-inspired handmade products, from key rings and Christmas decorations right up to life-size elephant sculptures. Anything in wire and beadwork we made. We formalized the industry. We brought in designers. We supplied Woolworths. We supplied Pick and Pay. And it was a real baptism of fire because I'd never manufactured a single thing in my life. I didn't know how to cost a product. I didn't know how to price a product. I didn't really understand the dynamics of export. So all of this was a real learning curve for me.
Wow.
But a fantastic one. And that really was the segue into what I do now, because as the company grew and it expanded and its profile grew, we got a lot of coverage, we got a lot of media because we were promoting, South African design and art. And we were also very much a social enterprise. We took a lot of the guys who you would have seen selling on the street corners, sort of peddling their wares, and we employed them formally and gave them access to things like sick leave and holiday pay and the benefits that any other employee would get. Sure. And so it was high profile. And as a result, people started organically reaching out to me and saying, how did you do it? How did you do that? How did you manage to get into Woolworths? What's it like supplying Pick and Pay? Can you guide me around export? And I organically started just giving a little bit of advice and a little bit of input here and there. And again, after about 7 or 8 years, I don't know why I tend to get this like 7 or 8 year itch, or I did at the time, but I realized that I actually preferred guiding and helping other people to doing it myself.
Right.
It was just more rewarding, I suppose, in a way, and it was less stressful. And also, I just felt like it was my calling to help other emerging entrepreneurs sort of perhaps circumvent some of the mistakes that I'd made as an entrepreneur. And just be more effective and be more confident in what they do. And that really led me into what I do now. And it's been 20 years of being a full-time consultant and coach and mentor. And as you say, hopefully another 20 still loading.
Still to go. Well, you're going to tell us about you'll share more about the future and what's to come. I want to just pause a bit because there's something so universal about your story. It's unique and it's specific to you. But there are two big themes here that, I mean, I've been in my career strategy world and industry for 12 years now, and I've heard these kind of frustrations time and time again. And the first is that you looked ahead in the industry that you were in, success, hospitality, Cape Grace. I mean, what a magnificent, beautiful hotel. But you looked ahead at the person who was, in leadership, and nothing about what he had in terms of his world or his life appealed to you. In fact, it was the absolute opposite. And that happens so often. Whether it's from accountants to lawyers to just good, solid corporate executives looking ahead going, this is not the world that we want. This is not the life that I want. But then the other theme that is unique to you, not necessarily as universal, but really interesting, and there's a bit of a debate raging, I keep hearing about this, of learn by doing. You just jumped into Streetwise, like you were ready to do it with your friend. The opportunity came about, so you were like doing it, or study how to do it. You went in and you learned you came up with the questions and the answers and the problems, and then you were able to put them together, and now you shifted out into helping other people with that. So, I mean, the debate that's raging is, should we be taking 200 and 250,000 rands of a corporate company's money or our money and investing in an MBA to learn something? Or should we take that money and start a business? Because there's so many opportunities of businesses that need to be started in South Africa. There's so many opportunities of things to get off the ground. So I really enjoy those two intersections of what changed, why you left the industry. And it was a purposeful decision of yours to leave. And then you learned how to do it. You were like learning in the job, in the moment. Streetwise was, huge business and a huge opportunity, but one that you then chose to step out of. What are your thoughts about this raging debate of learn it, in the moment, or study it and then go and do it?
I suppose it depends on one's personal circumstances. In my case, I did take a big leap of faith. So I left, like I said, a very comfortable position with a career trajectory that had been mapped out and was going to end in a GM somewhere. Because it just didn't resonate. I was starting to grow a family at that stage. My firstborn came along. He's now 22. And it was sort of, do I want to be working over December when my family is on holiday for the rest of my life? The answer was a flat no. So that was quite a big factor in my decision. And I was fortunate that my ex-wife was working, and she was actually we were able to just get by based on her salary, because I obviously took a huge knock in income just to go into a startup. So that was, it was a conscious decision to say I'm going to take the risk, but ultimately it was one that did pay off, and it was one that my soul wasn't being nurtured where I was. I loved elements about the hospitality industry. The people side of it was really nice. I loved interacting with people, helping them have a good experience. But the kind of systems and processes and mundane, repetitive nature of it and the excessive working hours for really what was quite limited financial reward, actually, in the grand scheme of things, was what tipped the scales. And it was just good timing that my friend and colleague came along and said, "Hey, I've got this idea. Are you keen?" To answer your second question, I think I'm a big believer in education. So, I do feel like it's always useful to study in an area of your interest, more importantly, perhaps in an area of your talent. I think maybe we do default a little bit too much to, what do we like or what are we interested in when it comes to studying further. Whereas actually we should be considering, what am I good at and how can I leverage that and how can I build on that in order to get ahead in my career. In my case, I studied a little bit on the fly. So I sort of jumped in with both feet, started the business. And then when I identified the areas that I was lacking, I found ways to access knowledge. So, for example, I did a sales and marketing diploma with a specific lens on the type of product that we were selling and trying to market. I did quite a lot of systems work and certificates and diplomas to learn how to kind of build the systems that could run and drive the business. So I learned organically on the fly, but I certainly hadn't studied an MBA or anything of that nature prior to going in. And I do feel like I would always also, although like I said, I believe in education very much, I would always default to the university of life. When I'm looking to employ people or work with people, when I'm considering someone for an opportunity, their experience is a lot more interesting and valid to me than their educational credentials. Just because that's how you learn. I learned more in the first year of running a business than I had in 8 years of working for other people.
Yeah. And I think there's this calling, right? There's this shift of applying the mindset of an entrepreneur to actual corporate roles. That's what there is a clarion call for that, just in terms of the AI and the shifts and changes in how we work with our heads. There's the thinking brain is going to be virtually completely replaced, but that heart currency, that emotional currency of why we do what we do and how we do it and loving what we do is what we need to lean into. So it's an interesting time. Never has there ever been anything, standing on the precipice of this human evolution with AI coming through. And it's such a fascinating conversation, specifically with regards to careers, specifically with regards to people who've had interesting careers and who've shifted and changed. I mean, it fascinates me no end. That's why I've got this podcast, and that's why I love doing what I love doing, just to unearth it and help share for people to be able to move forward from it. Tell me, let's move into social entrepreneurship. Let's move on to what's happening in South Africa with social entrepreneurship. You are so in tune with growing businesses that are starting, and helping businesses really last and turn a profit and continue to employ people and move forward. I know you've got this almost famous theory of yours, the leaky bucket analogy. So I'd love to hear some more about that. But just give us a sort of a top line of what's the state of social entrepreneurship in South Africa right now?
So, that's a great question. And I mean, for those of your listeners that are maybe not that familiar with how social enterprise differs from traditional business models, it's really just about business as a force for good. So that would be, starting a company or building a company that has a profit motive, but also has a secondary or sometimes even more primary directive of making a positive impact. So an example would be a company that's developing, solar solutions for use in rural areas for people with limited access to energy, or someone who's building, a new filtration system to allow people without access to clean water to get access. So I got into that space because Streetwires was very much a social enterprise, in the sense that our mandate was to create as many jobs as possible in a sustainable way. And like I said, we ended up employing 120 people and made quite a significant impact in that space. We did other things like we trained street children and unemployed how to make product so that they could then have something to make and sell. We did a lot of training. We had a satellite station up the West Coast at one point where we were working with seasonal citrus and farm workers who didn't have work out of season. So we sort of conceptualized a project for them there. So social enterprise became very much my area of interest. And I ended up being the entrepreneur in residence for the Social Enterprise Impact Lab that was funded by F&B as well as in partnership with Fatola, which was an accelerator designed to support and work with social enterprises. And I am still the head coach for the Social Innovation Awards, which is funded by the SAB Foundation, who are doing incredible work in that space. And every year we get these amazing concepts that I'm a judge for the initial intake. So you're getting people who are just coming up with the most incredible solutions. And I guess when you ask about the state of it, I think one thing that we still need to figure out as a country is we have such a dire need for businesses that do good, that sort of fill in the gaps that government is not able to fill. For example, access to healthcare, universal access to healthcare, universal access to energy, water, education. So all of these things government is trying, but there's big gaps. You'll find that social enterprises can often fill those spaces. Traditionally, nonprofits would have stepped in, and you'd have nonprofits doing things like healthcare in communities and so on. But we've seen that model is not that sustainable. It's very funding reliant. And essentially what social enterprise does is it adds a profit component to the mix. So can we do good? Can we give back to communities, but also monetize it in such a way that we become sustainable? And I think the biggest gap is that we don't have a business registration category that recognizes social enterprises in South Africa. In the UK, you have it. There's a type of an LLC that is recognized as a social enterprise, and thus, although it's a profit-making business, it gets certain things like tax breaks and so on. And it's also able to raise funding. Whereas here, most social enterprises end up having to have two entities. They have to have a non-profit and a for-profit. And the two have to have an MOU between them, and the non-profit is the one that raises the funds, and the for-profit one is the one that sort of holds the IP or does the actual implementation. And that's the biggest drawback, because we really do need lots of businesses doing good things in our country to realize our potential.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a fascinating shift that would open up so many opportunities. And often in my work, I come across great people who are loving what they're doing, but they have a need or a craving for more impact, more legacy. And there's a little bit of this assumption that, well, if I worked for something that was NPO funded, it would mean a sacrifice of my earning ability. But it doesn't have to be like that. That doesn't, what you're saying is that we need a correct category to allow access to opportunities for social entrepreneurship companies, but equally so, the person in the business running the business needs to be able to make a good profit, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. So tell us about the leaky bucket analogy. What is that? What does that actually mean?
So I found in my journey particularly at Fatola, where I facilitate a lot of workshops, and one of the workshops that we run at the start of all the programs that we implement there is called the Personal Transformation and Strategic Planning session. It's a 2.5-day, very transformative session. And what I found was that people were coming into that program thinking that money was the silver bullet. All they needed was funding, ideally free money, grant funding, And that would fix all the problems in their business. So it was like, I need a machine, or I need a car, I don't have a delivery vehicle, or I need investment so that I can kind of buy the building that I'm in, and then I'm going to be fine. And then it's A for away, just give me more money. And I realized, well, I saw firsthand that that's not true, that all the money in the world cannot fix a fundamentally flawed business model. That if you have gaps as a CEO or founder or an entrepreneur or blind spots, you can throw money at the problem till you're blue in the face, and it's just not going to happen. And I saw it in evidence, because certain businesses have had millions and millions in funding but still can't seem to become sustainable. So I came up with a very simple analogy. And at the start of all of these workshops, I say to everyone, imagine your business was a bucket, and you start pouring water into your bucket in the form of money, time, your energy, your focus, your resources, in the hope that the bucket's going to fill up and ideally overflow one day, and then it's, retire in Mauritius time. But the reality is that every bucket has got its holes. And some of those holes might be things like you don't have good HR systems, you can't retain staff. You don't have any financial management, so you're not familiar with the money in and out of your business, and you don't keep track of it. You don't manage your cash flow very well. It might be that your systems are overly reliant on you for their success. It's all in your head, so you can never really scale beyond your capacity. There's a whole host of potential holes. And unless you start fixing the holes, you can pour as much water into the bucket as you like, and it's never going to become full. And even now, 10 or 15 years after, some people have said in one of my workshops or my talks, they're like, the bucket, I never forgot that. I started fixing my holes, and finally the water started to fill up in the bucket. So it's just a really simple analogy. And I think one day it's going to be, there's definitely a book in that.
I think there's definitely a couple of books in you, but certainly there's the Leaky Bucket book. I love that analogy, and I'm going to extrapolate it for my work, and it's very similar in the sense that when people say, oh, I'm stuck, I'm frustrated, I just need a new job. Well, you're just going to change one stuck, frustrated job for another one that just looks a little bit different or looks a little bit better. What's got you to where you are now? Look at the data, analyze it. Why you want, what is it that's got you to the stuck frustration before you move on to something else? And I think that comes from us as a society being socialized into work hard and climb this ladder of success. We're so driven to go out and find something and keep working harder that we're not really encouraged to work hard on ourselves. We're not that, pause, reflection, meditation, great stuff now within this new, within 2025, and, meditation and focus and reflection was certainly not words that were given to me when I started in my corporate career. It was just go work hard and climb that ladder. But Anton, rounding off now, so yeah, there's a couple of books that you've got. I mean, are you writing a book? Is there a book that's going to come?
There is, actually. I'm busy with my first book. I've written a lot of articles over the years, and I had a monthly column in SAA's In-Flight magazine, Sawubona, around entrepreneurship for a long time. So I love to write. And I've been sort of nagged from a few quarters to put my thoughts, such as they are, down into something. So I am busy writing a book. It's really a reflection on, so one of my other pursuits or passions is the outdoors and fishing. So I've been a lifelong angler and keen outdoorsman and hiker and so on. So this is 15 lessons I've learned through nature and fishing that one can apply in business and life. And that's the kind of core premise. And it's taking some shape, and I'm hoping to have it completed by the latter part of this year. So sort of beginning of Q4.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Well, we'll have to have you back on Career Revolution podcast when that's completed, because as always, there's so much to uncover. And when we get past the initial career story, there's so much more there to talk about. And unpack. And it's reassuring to know that you're going to continue to do the work that you're doing, because not only have you got incredible experience, literal experience, because you were in a startup, you did create a business, but you're now harnessing that together to help other people and other South Africans put together, find the answers to the questions that they have in their business. And I think that leaky bucket analogy is simple, but incredibly profound. As we round off, where can we support you? Where can we follow you? LinkedIn, I know you're there. Is there anything else? I mean, for sure, like nothing like asking somebody online, will you come back for another episode when you've launched the book? Now you've got to do it.
Absolutely, yeah. So LinkedIn is probably the best way to get hold of me. If anyone wants to pop me an email, it's just my full name, Anton Ressel, Ressel, @gmail.com. If they've got any questions, I've got a lot of tools and resources that I'm always happy to share around personal development, goal setting, strategy, that kind of thing. And I'm very keen to grow my network and to just support people. I had some fantastic mentors along the way, so I can recognize very much the power of, a sage person walking your journey with you.
Absolutely, a guide on the side. So thank you for your time. Thank you for telling your story and sharing some really interesting evolutions. The cool thing about the Career Revolution podcast that I have heard from its listeners is that we're able to normalize the feeling of being stuck. We're able to normalize the sense of, well, look what happened there, and that's where he's got now. And it just, we need to talk about this more often, because being stuck or looking ahead in your industry and seeing where you don't want to be and making a change and kind of bootstrapping with one salary and then moving to another and then getting a lift, that's what happens. And that's the the non-linear path that makes careers really interesting and makes us who we are, being uniquely ourselves, to be able to have that super cool impact and do the thing that we absolutely love doing. So it's been great having you here, listening to your story, and we'll definitely have you back. But thanks for your time, Anton.
Thank you very much. I'd love to be back anytime.
Cool.